Well, Heidi ho, friendaroo. I hope you're doing super mega fantastic today because we are going to paint a snowman. And he's gonna have stars in the sky. And he's reaching with his little tiny arms with his red scarf, oh, way up high. If you never met me before, my name's Julie. I don't feel like being on camera today, so I'm going to do this tutorial without my face on camera. And that doesn't mean that we are not going to have a good time. So I want you to grab your simple supplies. I believe that you can learn how to be a great painter with just some simple supplies from the dollar store, so you don't have to break the bank to learn how to paint. Okay, so this is what I got going on for my supply list, and then we can paint this really pretty snowman together, okay? Now, as far as colors, I have what feels like way too many colors for this painting, but truly we only need this tiny little bit of orange for his nose and this tiny little bit of red for his scarf. And you can pretty much use whatever colors you want for the hat and scarf and all of these awesome things. Now for the rest of the painting, I have some white, some black, a little bit of dark blue here, shoop, focus in, a little bit of turquoise, and some light blue. As far as brushes are concerned, I have my holy trifecta of brushes here. I have my 3/4 inch Fatty McFadderson flathead, I have my 1/2 inch flathead brush here, and I have a nice long liner brush. Now, if you need it, you can grab a little smaller liner brush too if you're more comfortable with that. You definitely don't need a long one. And I also have an old toothbrush, which is also not necessary to spray a whole bunch of snow in the background. So grab all your supplies, make sure you have a napkin and a palette and some water, and let's get to painting a snowman. First things first, I'm going to get all of my colors on my palette. Now we're painting at home, remember, we don't have to use outrageous amounts of paint to make it happen. So I'm putting about a quarter size, or if you're Canadian, about a loonie sized amount of each color on my plate to start. I'm going to wait to put my orange and red on my plate because we don't need them for a little bit, so there's no sense in putting them on there. And I really just need a little tiny bit of black. I don't need a whole lot. So this is probably still going to be way too much paint. Oh, hey there. I'm going to move this setup over a little bit. Then I'm going to see if I can fit this side by side so we can look at the painting while we paint. Hey, novel idea, right? Jeez, why didn't I think of that before? Okay, here we go. So what we're going to do is we're going to paint this whole background before we start any snowmanning or anything like that. And I'm going to do it all with my big fat Fatty McFadderson flathead brush. Now to get started, I'm going to grab a little bit of water with my brush, and I'm going to grab a scoop of white. And I love this, you know, nothing better than starting with white paint on a white canvas, which is an 11 by 14 canvas, by the way, if you were wondering. And I'm just going to make a nice circle in the middle. So I took a pretty decent scoop and I had some water on my brush, so it's going to go pretty far. But it's a great way to start just kind of getting those juices flowing. Just bring it back and forth in a circle. And then I'm going to grab a little bit of blue, and I'm going to start on the outside of that circle. And I'm going to start to work my way in a little bit. So back and forth. I often will use the full face of my brush and go back and forth and try and make a decent circle. But eventually I'm going to do one of these. I'm going to start in the middle. I'm going to circle my way out to the edges of the circles and just keep blending those colors together. Now, the rule is the more you bring your brush back and forth, the more your colors will come together. So the more blended you want it, the more you need to go back and forth with your brush, or round and round. Now, you can get away with really streaky paint in this background. You don't have to have anything perfect by any means to make this look like a great painting. So whenever you feel like your stamina is done, we're gonna keep working our way out from the center out. I'm gonna start moving up my palette. I'm gonna grab some turquoise and I'm gonna just start mixing that in there too. Now we're gonna end up alternating a lot of these colors. I love the light blue and I love the turquoise. And I also love this dark blue, but there's something to be said about when you add tiny little itsy bitsy bits of black in there eventually. So just hold on. I have all this paint on my on my canvas. I'm going to keep just moving my brush around. Just moving it in a circle. I want to get some of these colors nice and blended. Just keep on moving my way out. Now, I also like to keep moving my brush back and forth, round and round, because I don't want any goobers on my painting. I want it to be nice and smooth, and I want to keep moving my paint to the point where it doesn't really move too much anymore so that it dries pretty fast. Because, you know, as we're moving forward, we're going to be putting a snowman on top, and I love quick and easy painting, so that's my reasoning. Now, as I start to move my way out, like I said, I'm going to start to take little tiny little bits of black. So you can see that tiny little bit there, and just start to mix them in at random. I love mixing a little turquoise and black together. So it's really about finding a little flow where our paint is flowing. So that means we have either enough paint on our brush to keep it moving, or every once in a while you can do a little dip in your water cup, tap it on your palette, or tap it in your next color and just keep moving to the edges of that canvas. Now, a little dip of water, a little tap on your palette will fill in any dry spots. So when you can see really fuzzy edges, or when you can see little canvas spots poking out from behind your paint, that means that it's dry. So adding a little bit of moisture or adding a little bit more paint will help the dryness. All right, so I'm going to keep alternating my colors with a little blue, a little dark blue, a little turquoise as I move out to these outside edges. And every once in a while, I'll even grab a little corner of white and mix it in there too. Now, it really is just kind of a feeling, okay? All of these colors are so nice together. You can't mess it up. The only way it really gets messed up, quote unquote, is if you take a big scoop of black and then bring it to your canvas thinking that it's going to mix in. When if you take a big scoop of black and mix it in, it's going to take over the whole canvas. So we want to avoid that. If you're going to mix in a little black, oh, why did I do that? You take a tiny little bit at a time and swoosh it in there and keep on going around all these edges here. So round and round, love will find a way, just give it time. All right, we'll make our way to the edge, up to the corners, and I'll leave it up to you. Now I like to get a little darker as I move to the outside edges of my painting, so adding a little bit of black up in these corners really helps that goal of mine of trying to reach those edges, or trying to darken them as I reach those edges. So, you know, while I get there, I'm just every once in a while grab a little bit of black and mix it in with that turquoise and dark blue, and every once in a while a little bit of white. And it's really up to you how blended you want it, what colors you want to use. You might want to add a little bit more blue than turquoise, or maybe you don't want to add any black at all, and that would be absolutely okay. I'm just saying that when you mix a little bit of black, like this black, blue, and turquoise mixture, it's real nice. It's a really nice combination. So, just saying. Sometimes it's hard getting in those little canvas holes, so that little drop of water goes a long way, okay? Now, you can see a lot of the bottom of our canvas is going to get covered up here, so like a good quarter of our 11 by 14 canvas is getting covered. So I don't worry too much about what's happening on the bottom edges of my painting. I just want to fill them in because it's nice to have that nice background there. The background dark color, so that our white ends up popping really nicely on top of it. As far as anywhere else, if you want to add in any extra colors, now is the time to do it. I suggest that as you're adding colors, just add a little bit at a time so that you're not having to blend forever. And if you find that there isn't any blending happening, grab a tiny drop of water and then just a little bit of that color that you want to whoosh in there. And that should really do the trick to get it all put together and get it on top there. So I'm going to leave it at that. Now, once it's full and you like it, all right, so I'm going to give my brush a good rinse. I'm going to try and not knock my cup over. I'm going to rinse it off on my napkin. And now I just have a clean, dry brush. Now, dry is relative because I did just dip it in my water, so it's a little damp, but it's basically dry. I dried it as much as it possibly could be dried on my napkin. And what I like to do is I just give it a once over with a clean, dry brush. So I'll start in the center and just make sure I'm pushing my paint around so that it helps dry up my background as much as possible before moving forward. Now we are still going to work with a little bit of wet paint, but I don't want to see any goobers, okay? I don't want to see big globbies of paint everywhere. It's nice and thin, and that's all you need to know. So finish filling in your background how you want to see it. Give it a once over with a clean, dry brush, and then we're going to start to map out where our snowman lives. Cool beans, y'all? All right, so what we can do now is we are just gonna we're gonna take some white and we're gonna make a little square at the bottom. I'm gonna a little bit of white on my brush and I'm gonna bring it back and forth. I'm even gonna add a little bit of water to my brush because it's not gonna look very white at first. It's gonna kind of turn into like a light blue, a light bluey turquoisey color. But basically, I just want to map out where my snowman is going to live. So let's see here. Go here. Shh. You can make a line across like that. And then just take your brush, full face brush from one side to the other. And I want you to just give this a nice little coat of white down here and mix it in with the colors in the background. Beautiful. Okay, that's all I want to see for now. I'm going to give my brush a rinse. And now that we know where our snowman is going to live, it's got some ground to live on, is what I'm trying to say. We're going to start with the snowball down at the bottom. We're going to work our way up. I'm going to continue to use my big fat Fatty McFatterson flathead brush. If you feel like you want to use a different brush at any time, please feel free to do so, okay? Now, let's do a little measurement here. So we have about 2 inches on each side of our big snowball in the middle. I always love to start small, so I'll start in the center and I'll kind of work my way out just like we did in the background here, side to side until I find a size that I like. I don't want you going to your canvas and going like one side over here and one side over here. Then you're just gonna have a big old snowball down here. It's not gonna fit on your canvas. It's so important that we start small and work our way out to make it bigger. All right, so I'm gonna just grab a little bit of white to start. And the same thing's going to happen that did with our background here. It's going to pick up some of the blues in the background, but that's perfect. That's exactly what we want to see, okay? So starting right, right in the middle here, I'm going to start by making a little circly ball back and forth. And I'm just going to grow out the edges until I find a size that I like. Now, snowballs don't usually come super perfectly round. I like the idea that he's, got a little flat, like maybe he's a little wider on the bottom and he's got some different sized snowballs making his body up. But basically, I'm going to take my brush, I'm going to move back and forth, side to side, to distinguish how big my snowball or snowman is going to be. Now, it's okay if it's a little bigger. I just want you to be mindful of how big it's getting before you go and, just make a big old circle and then try and color it in. So we just take it one step at a time, one little bit of white, little white swoosh here, little white swoosh there, and create the snowman of our dreams. Okay. So here we go, side to side. And it did exactly like I said. So our white snowball is not white right now. It eventually will be white, but not right now. And just remember that age-old rule. If your edges are dry on your snowman, all you need is either A, a little bit more paint on your paintbrush, or B, a tiny tap of water before you grab your paint. Cool. All right, so let's make a secondary snowball. I'm going to start, okay, by just making a little kind of like elongated U here and build on top of that. Like I said, if I start small, I can always make it bigger. So that's exactly what I'm going to do. Just one little swoopy at a time. Now, as my paint is drying, because, it's reaching up to the top and that's kind of where we started. So it's going to look a little whiter than the other ball because this is where we ended. We got a little bit more color down here. So just do the best you can. And just know that if it's a different color right now, it's all good. We have to give it a second coat later. Now, if you're really struggling to see between the snowball and the white, you can always take a little extra blue and just kind of make a little shading around the edges if you feel like you need to really see where it lives. But besides that, I think that's good. Now, remember, we made a big snowball, but when you're putting snowballs on top of each other, it's not going to be perfectly round at the bottom. You can see it kind of gets flattened out a little bit here. So if you just need to take your brush and kind of flatten it out, if it looks a little too round on the bottom, flatten it out a little bit here, and then you can incorporate the rest into the rest of the snowball here. Okay, let's put that head on, folks. I'm gonna grab a little white, and again, now here's a tricky thing. Now there's, we have this snowball. It cut off quite dramatically on top of this one, but he's wearing a scarf, so we almost need to leave a little bit of room between the top of our snowball, which is probably about here, and the head. So instead of cutting off the top part of this snowball, I'm actually going to make his head hover just right on top of it because I want there to be a little space for his scarf to live. So I'm going to put this one right. The bottom of the top snowball just kind of kisses the top of the middle one. Now our Snowballs are getting smaller, so if you need to use a smaller brush for the head, I totally understand. And you can see it gets a little whiter too, hey? As we move up. Okay, I think that's pretty good. You know, just take a second look. If you feel like the proportions are off a little bit, you can always, you know, maneuver the edges a little. If you need to make, you know, the head a little bigger or the body a little wider, whatever you got to do, just take a few seconds and even out your edges and make it the proportions that you want to see. Now, I believe it's a good idea to put a little blue line here just so we can see where it lives. So if you put a little tiny piece of blue on the corner of your brush and just kind of swoop across a little, it's going to make a really nice little blended line down here just to make sure you know exactly where you want your snowball to end for when we give our snowballs a second coat of paint. I feel like this is good. Okay. Yep, I'm gonna stop. Okay. And I want you to do the same. So whenever you're done, give your brush a rinse, and when we come back, we'll start to place some of our objects in place. Amazing. Now, before we begin to put any other elements on our canvas, I really want to get all of these like really blasted stars here. So I'm gonna grab my old toothbrush. I grab a little water. It really holds the water, so I give it a few taps. Now, with that extra water, I grab some white, and I'll even take that and kind of rub it against, like, I'll actually brush it like brushing your teeth against the side of my palette so that it works its way into the bristles and isn't gonna drip everywhere. If you hold it on top, there's a strong likelihood that whatever water's left in there is gonna drip on your canvas. So if you just tilt it up a little bit, you can if you hold it straight at your canvas like this, take your index finger and pull back, you can start to add all sorts of fun sprays on there. Listen, if it's not enough, just add more paint. It's better to start small and work your way up because you can get splatters and all sorts of crazy stuff on there. It starts to drip and whatnot. It's totally what it's doing. But that's why we have it standing upright. And it really depends on how big of a snowstorm you want. You might want it to be a little bit more chill in the snow department, or maybe you want it to be even crazier than this. So that's great. It looks so magical. I love it so much. Now, as we're kind of waiting for things to dry, we can start to map out where our hat lives and where our scarf lives, okay? What I want you to do is I'm gonna grab my medium flathead brush here, so the smaller version of my flathead brush, and I'm gonna create a hat that comes up and over and down. I'm not gonna really worry about the snowy part right now. I'm just gonna leave that be. And I used a mixture of a little bit of that turquoise and blue together. I think it's a really great combination. I'm gonna put a little tap of water on my brush to make sure that it's all gonna go smoothly for me. And as I'm kind of loading up my brush, I'm gonna load it up by pulling away. So I kind of flatten my brush. So I don't dive in like straight on. I kind of flatten my brush out to make sure my bristles are gonna be put together nicely. And then I put my brush straight on the canvas. So, you know, over towards the right-hand side of his head. Put it straight on there. And I'm just gonna pull up and over. I'm gonna kind of wiggle it about. And as I reach the other side of his head, I'm gonna pull down and I'm gonna fling up and get a nice little point on the end. So I'll say that again. My brush is flat and straight right on the canvas, the whole thing. I'm going to pull up with my flat straight brush. I'm going to pull over, and as I work my way to the end, I'm going to fling. So I'm kind of pulling up and off my canvas. I'm going to do the same over here, but I'm not even going to worry about any of this. I'm kind of going over to the side of his head. So almost halfway down, even, yeah, about halfway down his head. And I'm going to pull over and connect these two lines together. And then color it in. Just with a mixture of those two colors. So because we're working with colors that are already in the background of our painting, you might find that it might get a little lost in there depending on what colors it's going over. Like the back of my toque gets a little lost down in this area here, so I can try to add either a little darker to it. I can add a little bit of that blue, or I can even add a little tint of white to give it a little highlight as well, so that there's a little bit of contrast and you can really see where the end of the hat is flailing off to. There we go. Now, as far as this nice little puffy white brim is concerned, I'm actually going to grab my smaller liner brush that I have here, and I'm going to grab some of that white. And I'm going to bring in a little bit of the blue from my hat. I want to take some on so that I can see the contrast of like the blue and white. I want to see some of that come together. Now, if the white's not picking up any of that blue, like it's not picking up a whole lot of it right now, I can even take just a little bit and kind of swoosh it in there to give it a little bit more dimension, because it's hard to see against his bright white head. I make it a little thicker at the top and over on the side here. And as I bring it over to the right-hand side, or I'm sorry, the left-hand side over here, it gets a little thinner, as if it's going around the side of his head. Okay, now it's subtle and it's not the easiest to see. My lights are really dark here, but I just want you to see that it's got this little lean-to. And like I said as well, if you grab a little bit of that dark blue and just kind of add a tiny little bit to the bottom area of your poofiness here, it's going to give it a nice little shadow, and you'll be able to distinguish between the poofiness of the hat and the whiteness of his face. All right, good job. And while I have that little bit of white on my brush, I can give him a little poof at the end here as well. You know what? I might as well give him a little highlight since I'm kind of cruising over in this direction anyways. Put a little white highlight on top. Beautiful. Okay, so now that his hat is on there, I'm going to map out where his scarf lives by adding a little bit of red to my palette. And basically, between in this little kind of triangular crevice here, I have my snowball about right here. I'm going to pop in a scarf. So the scarf's going to fill in this area between, you know, the neck and the body. And I'm going to grab that little bit of red, and over in this fold, or over in this, you know, little V fold here, I'm going to make two bumps. I'm going to go bump, bump. And I'm going to follow the bottom of his face, but I'm just going to slightly cut off the bottom of his head here and pull to the other side. Same here. I'm going to just pull up and come over to the other side of his body, where we're going to have a nice knot in his scarf, and then it's going to flail off into the distance as far as you want it to go. Now you can color as you go if you want. It's kind of what I'm doing here. And it really depends on the kind of red you're using. So there's some dollar store reds that are a little bit more see-through. They're a little bit more transparent, so they don't show up really, really well. And then there's some that show up a little bit like more opaque, where it's nice and dark and it really like fills in the gaps. Depending on which one, you might need to give your scarf a second coat of paint or not. I guess it's going to depend on what kind of paint you're using. All right. So this is coming along famously. So what I would really like you to do is just finish up your hat, add your little scarf on, and then we are going to start to work on all those other little details. Fantastic, friends. So our snowman is he's got this beautiful starry sky happening. What I would love to do first is just to add his arms so we kind of know where we need to keep our stars in check. And that's just it. So that's what I'm going to do. Now I'm going to use my long liner brush. So I'm going to grab a little water with my brush. I'm going to add it to the side of my black paint and just mix in, make it a little extra watery. Now, whenever I do that, I always give my brush a little twist and kind of tap it on my palette so I don't get a big drip that happens. So I'm going to get in behind here and I'm just going to touch very, very lightly and kind of wiggle like wiggle up and, you know, make a couple little sticks that look like hands. It's a branch, so you can have more than just, there might be a couple little branches coming off the main one. Same with over here. I'm going to pop up, but I'm going to go behind my hat. I'm going to pull up and same deal, make a couple little branch fingers. Need to thicken it up a little, that's cool. I got a little bit in my hat, so I'm just going to wipe it off. Perfect. Now while I have that little bit of black on my brush, I'm just going to kind of wiggle a little shading into my scarf. I'm going to pull around that back left edge. I cannot get my left and right today. Oh my goodness. And mix it in with my red paint here and just kind of underneath his scarf and pull it into his little knot so that it makes it a little bit more burgundy. Just adding these little details makes a big difference, but I'm just really just shaking my brush around and mixing it in with my red here. Perfect. Now for these stars, I like to keep it really simple, so I'll show you what I like to do. I'm going to grab my smaller liner brush and grab some white. And what you can do is just start right in the middle and start right in the middle, make a little circle of white, and then I pull up and make a triangle on top. I pull that circle to the sides, downwards. I make a little angle and then off to the right and left. So I go up to the top, down to the left and right, and then off to the sides and make a little star. Now, I kind of like them to be a little folk arty, so I don't go for perfection. I kind of just want it to look kind of like a little off. Like I don't want to have a perfect star is what I'm trying to say here. I like it looking a little folk arty. Now, you can see this star here is mucho bigger than this one. I can leave it as is, or all I have to do is really just grow my edges out from side to side and just follow around the outside edges that I already made to create a bigger star. like that. And that's how I do it with all of them. So I make a circle, I pull up to the top, whatever direction I want the top of my star to go, pull to each side, pull down, and voila, little tiny stars all the way along. You can put as many as you'd like. If you want there to be more than 5, you can add more than 5. It's really up to you. Circle, pull up, pull to the sides, pull down. If you're really feel insecure about adding these stars onto your canvas, you can always, if you have a white paint pen, you can, little cheat sheet it with a little white paint pen. That always makes things easier and works perfectly great. You can also use a white colored pencil or white pencil crayon, whatever you want to call it. Now, and I just want you to see, on this one, the stars went from hand to hand. From this one, they stayed in the middle of his hands, and that's okay. It still looks like he's ah, with his stars in the sky. So why don't you finish those stars up, and then we can really start to put together the rest of his body. Now that we have a lot of the main elements on there, I just want to make sure everything's going to look like a white snowman. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to the base of my snowman. I'm going to grab some white, and I'm going to add another coat of white on here. Now, this time around, I'm not trying to make, I don't want it to be perfectly colored in white. I want to see some of the blue still poking out of the background. So I get a little bit more particular around the edges because I want nice clean edges on the side of my snowman. And on the bottom, around the outside edges of my snowman. But as for the inside, I don't care so much, really. So I want it to look a little dry. I want it to look a little, wily. And I want to see some of that blue poking through the background. Like so. And I'm going to do the same in the middle of my ball here. My snowball. Just be mindful that if you have some red, just try not to pick it up if your scarf is still wet. Now, it depends on how much white is in the face. For me, I feel like his face is white enough right now to just leave it be. So just make sure, you can see how much more the extra white whitens it up, but you can still see a lot of the details of that darker blue that we had in behind our snowman in the first place. Now, we're going to do the same thing in the back or on the ground here as well. You can see I'm taking some white and I'm just kind of shuffling back and forth here, adding some extra white into the groundscape, but I don't want it to be fully white. I really want to still see a lot of those blue shadows poking through. I try and bring it up to my snowman, but I don't want to rifle through my snowman. And I still want to have a nice little shadow underneath here. So I'm just going to do a few back and forth strokies of white. And I'm going to take a little bit of the dark blue, and I'm just going to add a little bit of the dark blue down. Oh, keeps mixing with the white. A little bit of the dark blue underneath to give him a little bit of a shadow. Nice. All right. Awesome. So with that said, we really only have a couple little details left, right? We have to put on his carrot nose and his little coal eyes and all of that good stuff. So whatever brush you're the most comfortable with, making a tiny little point at the end, I want you to grab a little bit of orange. We don't need a whole lot. And I'm gonna just add a tiny bit of water so that my brush is gonna act really smoothly on my canvas. Now, depending on the kind of brush you have, if you have a liner brush, I feel like when you flatten your brush out into the paint, even if you're supposed to technically have a point on the end of your brush, if you flatten it out, having that flat edge is really helpful to gently pull out to the sides here and keep a nice little point on the end. And then just fill it in the best you can. Just like everything else, you know, if it's not like super perfectly perfect, that's okay. It doesn't have to be super perfectly perfect. Carrots come in lots of different shapes and sizes. So if it's a little round in some parts, or if it's a little, you know, wide or whatever it is, it's all good. Now, the optional part of the nose is if you want to add a little shading in, but I'm not going to lie, sometimes it can really put a back seat on moving forward, because adding a little bit of black into your orange can be a little bit tricky. So what we do is we take the tiniest, littlest, barely non-existent bit of black. So I barely touch my brush to it, and I'm still going to wipe it off. And then I'm going to use that tiny little bit to just do a little cruise under the nose here and mix it into the side, like just underneath. So I take the tiniest little bit and then I wipe that tiny little bit off so that I barely have any on my brush. So when I mix it in with my orange, it's really, really light. Now I just want a little bit more. I'm going overboard now, but just a little darker on this edge here, and then I'm good. There, perfect. Now, last but not least, we have his eyes and his buttons and his face and all that good stuff. So what I like to do is I will take the wooden handle of my paintbrush. You can see I use it a lot. And I dip that wooden handle into my black. And you can decide if you want his eyes a little wider, a little shorter. So what I'm going to do is these eyes are pretty wide apart, so I'm going to make a little bit closer together and show you what that looks like. I'm going to put one here, just right on top of his nose. I'm going to put one here. So you can see the difference in what they look like, a little closer, a little further. And if you want, a good way to do it is kind of starting in the center of his mouth and making little dots going out from either direction, so you can at least find that center point of his smile and work it out from there. So you can see this guy's got like a nice wide smile with a wide set eyes. This guy's got a little bit closer eyes with a little bit of a smaller smile, a little bit of a smaller smile. That's really hard to say. And then some buttons in the center. And that's that whole painting. Now, if you want to add a little extra snow to, like, you know, maybe make some nice big snowflakes, just grab some white with the bottom of your paintbrush handle and add some extra pops of snow into the background. Oh, and don't grab black and do that. That's what I just did. Be more mindful than that. Be more mindful, Julie. Get all crazy. So whenever I'm done a painting, I love to just take a little lean back and see if there's anything that I'm missing or anything I can add. And some of those things can be, you know, I could probably make his scarf a little longer. I could maybe add a little bit of snow. I could add some snow onto his arms to like show that, or even to the end of his nose here. You could put a little snow on his nose, or even on his hat if you want to, you know. I didn't do that in the original, but I'm just showing you what can happen. So anywhere where snow can fall, if you want to add accumulations of snow, just anywhere where you think the snow would stick is a great place to put a little white wiggly line, or just like tap a little bit on top of those areas. And when you feel like you have completed the process, congratulations. I'm super proud of you. I want you to grab a little bit of paint and put your name on it. You know what? I'm gonna use red. I'm gonna put my initials down here, little JR. And voila, tout fini. Now, just a friendly reminder that I love hosting virtual paint parties and in-person paint parties. So if you are in my area, I'm happy to come and throw a party for you and your friends and family. If you are separated, I'm happy to jump on the Zoom or whatever streaming network that we use and do a virtual party for you and your friends and family, or maybe your workmates, or maybe, you know, you guys are a virtual team and you're working all over. This is a great way to team build. So please feel free to go and check out juliespaintparty.com. You can look into all of my offerings, and I would also love to see your finished products. So if you head over to my Facebook page, you can go to the Julie's Paint Party public Facebook group and take a picture of your painting and show us your finished results. We would love to see them. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today. I love painting with you, and I'll see you next time. Bye.